United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Beagle,
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Present.
Councilmember Behrman,
Present.
Councilmember Gacho,
Here.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Here.
Councilmember Sharp,
Present.
Councilmember Smiley,
Here.
quorum present.
Thank you. Changes or additions to the agenda as presented tonight? City Manager?
Mayor, I do not have any changes or additions.
Very good. Any from the dais? Very good. Moves on to presentations. We're going to add one quick presentation tonight. At this time, I'll call up Public Safety Director Ron Moore.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Madam Clerk, City Administration, and members of the public. My name is Ron Moore. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Wixom. And Mayor, I think it goes without saying that our community was rocked to its core last Tuesday, November 30th, when we experienced the tragedy that we experienced at Oxford High School. There's another tragic anniversary that we are experiencing today. And it happened on December 14th, 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut. And on that day, on that terrible day, an active assailant, an active killer went into Sandy Hook Elementary School and killed 20 children and 6 adults. 20 beautiful children and 6 adults trying to protect those 20 beautiful children lost their life on that day. And Mayor, I found it interesting, tragically interesting, that we were experiencing that anniversary today on the very day that 8 training staff members from the Wixom Police Department were in our very schools here in the city of Wixom, and will be tomorrow and Thursday, attempting to teach the students and the staff and the teachers how to protect themselves from an event like this. And today was the first day of that. And as I said, it will continue tomorrow and Thursday. And I just want the members of the public to know that the Wixom Police Department takes the safety of our children and our students and staff very seriously. And Mayor, I guess I would just respectfully ask that maybe we could have a moment of silence for these.
This time we'll have a moment of silence for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. On to the second presentation of tonight. It's the presentation of the fiscal year 2020-2021 City of Wixom Financial Audit. In accordance with Section 8.7 of the City Charter and that of the State of Michigan, an independent audit of all city accounts is conducted annually utilizing standards developed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB. This year, again, the firm of Plant Moran PLLC conducted the audit, and the city has received an unmodified opinion from them, which is the highest form of assurance the city can receive. In addition, no material weaknesses were identified through the audit process. At this time, I'd like to call up Doug Bear from Plant Moran for his little presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. City manager said I should wear a tie today. I didn't realize that maybe I could have underdressed just a bit. You look great.
Thank you.
Mayor Beagle, fellow council members, thank you for inviting me tonight to come to present the results of the audit for the June 30th fiscal year end for the city. As Mayor Beagle indicated, we did have an unmodified opinion on the financial statements this year. That is the highest form of assurance that you can receive from an independent third-party firm. And it's really the opinion that both the bond rating agencies and the state of Michigan are looking for when they look at your financial statements. In your packet tonight, you have 3 items. You'll have the graph presentation, which is up on the screen. You'll have the general purpose financial statements, which is the larger package. And then there's our end-of-year audit letter as well that's addressed to the mayor and city council. Before I jump into the deliverables, I wanted to just take a minute to thank the city staff. In addition to their normal day job, getting ready for the audit, putting up with our data requests during the audit, and then sitting down with us after the end of the audit and listening to our recommendations and kind of walking through the draft financial statements, it takes a lot of time. And both the city manager's office and the finance director and her team, they're actively engaged on a day-to-day basis in the audit process. But we also do talk to a number of the other departments, whether it's fraud inquiries. We sat down with the mayor and went through those as an example. Police gets involved, city clerk provides information around meeting minutes and things of that nature. So I just really want to thank all the departments that are involved in getting ready and helping us get through the audit, because we do have a number of data requests, and those were fulfilled on a timely basis, and the staff was quite confident in getting them completed. So thank you. With that said, there's 3 deliverables in your package. I think what I'd like to do is start with the end of audit letter, because that's a fairly quick discussion, and then we can walk through the graph package. The graph package is really meant to kind of put together some of the highlights of the year related to the audit. The end of audit letter is a little skinny letter here, and it's addressed to the mayor and city council, as I mentioned. This is really the back-end communication to our front planning that we do for the engagement. So we do sit down with city manager, we did sit down with the mayor, and kind of walk through what our engagement looks like, where are the risks in the engagement, how are we going to address those risks. And then this kind of lays out, well, here's what happened. And so I won't spend a lot of time on the language, but a couple things I did want to point out to you. First of all, this was the year that you implemented a new accounting standard. It was called GASB 84. I won't bore you with all the details, but what it did do is it made the city go through and have to analyze, are we properly accounting for our different funds under this new accounting method? And there were some changes that resulted from that. The biggest one was that the assets of your OPEB plan actually came onto the city's financial statements as part of the fiduciary activities. So that was a fairly large change this year if you were to look at the statements. That's probably the biggest change that happened. There were some other minor changes, but that was the big one. So that was a change that we had to really work through with Marilyn and her team. One of the other things to point out is I know a lot of times when people think of audited financial statements, they think every number is exact. But there are some estimates that go into putting together the numbers for the financial statements. The primary sensitive estimates for City of Wixom, and this would be consistent with what we see in other communities, are the assumptions that go into developing the liabilities related to your OPEB, which is your post-employment benefits, as well as your pension plan. There are a number of assumptions there related to rate of return, discount rates, healthcare trends that go into those numbers. We do take a look at those. The actuary puts those together. We did find what they did to be reasonable, and we believe that those estimates are accurate. The only other comments in the letter related to the required communications is we did not have any disagreements with management. We did not have any adjusting journal entries this year either. So for a city of Wixom size, we typically would have a number of journal entries. In some years we've had those out here. We did not this year. And as the mayor mentioned, we did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, which are accounting terms, but they're really used if you have issues in terms of how you process information, how you report information, inconsistencies in information, you end up with some level of deficiencies that are reported to City Council. We did not identify any of those in this year's engagement. Lastly in the letter, just 2 quick items that I wanted to just touch on. One is there are a number of charges that occur from the general fund to other funds within the city, really for services provided by the general fund. City management is taking a look at those charges to see, under today's model, are those commensurate with the services that are rendered to those other funds. We do have the charges there. We want to have a strong basis for those and one that's consistent with how we operate today. So that's one thing that's going on, and that'll be reflected in this year's numbers coming up in the year that you're in right now that you budgeted for. The other information in here is primarily legislative. There's a lot of information about grant monies that are out there. The city has taken advantage of grant monies both in the audit year that we're talking about and also in the year that you're in now, your budget year. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the graphs. But lots of information in here. We do have a resource center that we've set up. There's a number of webinars that are on demand if you have more ideas, more interest in finding out about some of the resources that are out there, both at the state of Michigan and at the federal level related to grant funding. So with that, I think I'm going to close on the letter and jump into the graphs if I may. At the front of the graphs, I tried to do a little bit of a highlight of the year. So what happened during the year? We've already talked about the unmodified opinion. In addition to that, and this was really focused on the general fund, the general fund balance at the end of the year, the unassigned fund balance, was about 30% of your annual expenditures. And so we often get asked, like, what's a good level of fund balance to have? And we typically, the range is quite broad. We typically would say somewhere between 50 and 40%. You're sitting at about 30% for your unassigned fund balance, so I think you're in a good spot there. Normally, you'd like to see a higher percentage in years where there's more uncertainty, and I would certainly say the last couple of years there's been a lot of uncertainty with the pandemic. In years where it's pretty more cut and dry, then maybe you could get away with a little bit of less of a fund balance. I also wanted to mention that the city has designated about $3.2 million in this audited financial statements, if you were to look at the balance sheet, for future capital expenditures within the general fund as well. During the audit year, you spent roughly $3.6 million on capital infrastructure, and that's down a little bit from the prior year, and that includes both your governmental assets as well as your water and sewer assets. Your pension system as of June 30th is 99% funded, and your OPEB system is actually in an overfunded position right now where we have actually an asset on the books related to your OPEB. That's at 168% funding level. A big reason for that is, one, the city has continued to make some smaller contributions toward pension, but the investment performance on both of those plans was out of sight this last year. And so you're seeing that in your funding percentages that are there. Lastly, the city did receive COVID funding totaling roughly $678,000 for the audit year that we're in. So you'll see that your intergovernmental revenue was up significantly from where it was last year. Maryland was able to keep it just under the $750,000 requirement for a single audit, so I'll applaud her for that. Because there is a requirement that if you spend more than $750,000 of federal money in any given audit year, fiscal year, that you have a separate audit related to that at a compliance audit. So you do not have to have that for this past year because you were under that threshold. And those monies were CRF monies that we received both through the state of Michigan as well as through Oklahoma. Jump into the first graph relative to the general fund. So this is a comparison, a 5-year comparison of your general fund revenue. And as you can see, there's a breakdown of the different sources for the revenue. Your largest source of revenue is your property taxes. That's about 61% of your total revenue. That's up a bit this year from the prior. That's mostly related to valuation adjustments because your millage went down a little bit. It actually went down a bit. But because of the value increases, you did have a little higher property tax number within your general fund. The intergovernmental is up about $600,000 from where you were last year. A lot of that is that funding that I mentioned before. And then your building permit revenue is up significantly. The expenses are also up commensurate with that. And that's really primarily due to a lot of the development that's occurring on Wixom Road here at the old Lincoln Flat. I drove by there tonight. Every time I go by there, I marvel at how much has gone up since the last time I drove by there. So there's a lot going on. Your other revenue sources were pretty consistent with the prior years for charges for services, your cable franchise fees, and other revenue. You can see your franchise fees, though, there is a trend there. That's continued to go down as people find different ways to stream their television. On the expenditure side, there's also a 5-year trend that's shown there. For the most part, the numbers stayed consistent from year to year. The one area that there was a big difference is we made a large pension contribution in the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. That helped to get our funding up toward that 99% along with the investment performance. And so that was a dramatic drop in the funding for this year. That was down to $249,000. And then secondly, your transfers out of debt service. We had a larger transfer to our capital improvement fund in the fiscal year ended 2020. And so we had $4.8 million of transfers in debt service in that year versus 2.4 this year. General fund. We talked a little bit about fund balance. So this gives you a little bit of a trend line for revenues and expenditures for the particular year. 2019 is the outlier because that was the year where we issued the bonds for pension and OPEB. So that shows up both in the revenue side and in the expenditure side, where we actually paid down those legacy liabilities. But if you look year to year, we are up a bit on the expenditure side or on the revenue side. I'm sorry, on the fund balance. The fund balance is up this year about $3 million from where we were last year. We had budgeted about a $1.6 million increase this year. A lot of that increase, a lot of that $3 million is what's sitting in the designated fund balance for capital outlay within the general fund. The next graph gives you a little bit of a highlight of, so where do all of the tax dollars that the city collects, where do those go? And so you can see here that for every dollar collected by the city for taxes, about 37 cents on that dollar actually is money that stay within the city, and the balance go to schools and other governmental constituencies. These percentages are fairly consistent with last year. The city percent last year was close to 40%, so it's dropped a bit, and the cities have actually gone up 2%, so they kind of flip-flopped year over year. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of the magnitude of the dollars that go through the city that they collect on behalf of the other entities, within the fiduciary funds, you'll see that we have ins and outs of about $22 million that we collect. So we bill it, collect it, process it, and then remit it to the other governmental entities. And that doesn't really show up in your numbers per se, but you are managing that process, and so that does take a fair amount of employee personnel costs to do that. Switching over just to spend a minute on the water fund. So this is really a graph of revenue, expenses excluding depreciation and unrestricted fund balance. And you can see that the revenue was down from the prior year, but that was because last year was the last year that we had a property tax within the water fund to pay off the debt. The debt was paid off at the end of June of 2020. So the revenue declined from the prior because that property tax revenue is not in there. But if you look year over year, the number of units billed and the rate billed was higher than the prior year for 2021. It's good to see that your revenue exceeds your cash outflows, so I think that's a positive. From an operating income standpoint, the water fund was about break even. And so that would be an area that would be important that the city continue to take a look at the rate structure to make sure you're covering your cost of operations. Because the water fund does not have a lot of liquid resources, no pun intended, as compared to the sewer fund. The sewer fund is more liquid than the water fund. And so water rates are something that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to covering the cost of operations. This is a similar graph on the sewer fund, and you can see from a fund balance, unrestricted net position standpoint, as well as revenue and expenditures. The revenues do exceed the expenditures in each of the years, which is good. So you are covering the cost of operations within your sewer fund based on your current rate structure. The next two graphs give you just a sense for what have we done from a capital investment infrastructure investment standpoint, both in our general government assets and our water and sewer assets, which will follow this graph. As you can see here, we've got a little bit of a mountain peak there where we went from 2017 to 2019, we were up almost to $6 million. This year we were back down a little bit below around $2 million. The line going across to the orange is the annual depreciation. And so typically you like to see some level of consistency of asset replacement that's consistent with the amount of your depreciation each year. On average, I think you're there, but the more recent trend for 2021 is a little bit down below the depreciation. On the water and sewer side, which makes up your enterprise fund, you can see that the level of capital investment is pretty consistent with depreciation in 2021, where the lines cross. It's very close. We were higher in 2020 and about break even again in terms of capital investment versus depreciation in 2018 and 2019. And this is just kind of a nice overview to think about, as you continue to reinvest in the city, and you've done that quite well, in my opinion. Keep an eye on how are these assets being depreciated. Are we reinvesting at a rate that's somewhat close to the depreciation of the assets that are in place? The last graph, just to give you a little bit of a sense of how are we doing with our pension and retiree healthcare funding, relative to the, other communities within the state and within Oakland County. So City of Wixom is in the blue column, and you can see that you're at 99% funding, as I mentioned, on the pension, 168% or just shy of that on the OPEB. So you're well ahead of where other communities are within the county and within the state. And so you're in that position because you did bond a couple of years back. And in this year in particular, you're reaping the benefits of that because the assets invested related to those bonds have performed very well and well ahead of any interest rates that you're paying on that debt. So I feel pretty good. Couple other just reminders. So in the front of the audited financial statements is what's called a management discussion and analysis. And that's where really the city management sits down and talks about the year and talks a little bit about of the go forward. So I would encourage you to read that. If you didn't have a lot of time to go through the whole financial statements, reading that MD&A really gives you a good flavor on how did this year play out, what were some of the challenges, what were some of the things we did well, and then going forward, what can we expect? So I think the MD&A is a really good resource. One of the other things we did talk about tonight, we didn't have it in our grasp, but there are other funds at the city. So we have a number of special revenue, capital projects, and capital improvement funds. The three that I wanted to just mention would be your 2 road funds. So you have separate road funds for major and local roads. And then you do have a capital improvement fund as well. There's a number of resources within those funds that could be used to help fund projects as you go forward. So as you're thinking about your capital asset planning, the general fund certainly is a piece of that, but you do have available dollars in those other funds that you should be considering as well as you're figuring out what it is that needs to be done, prioritizing what that is, and looking at the available resources to actually fund any improvements as you go forward. Okay. So let me stop there, and happy to entertain any questions.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Oh, thank you. Doug, great presentation, thank you,
Thank you.
and nicely gone through. Quick question for you. So the ARP fundings will be coming in
Yes.
this fiscal year.
Yes.
So does that mean we're absolutely guaranteed the additional audit next year?
Not guaranteed, so you're going to have our fundings that come in for the year we're in now and subsequent year. So so depending on how much comes in and how much gets spent would dictate whether that other audit would be required or not. Marilyn, I believe the funding is about 1.4 million. Does that sound about right?
Yes, and we received half of it, I don't know, about a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Okay, so around 700,000?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the next will come in next fiscal year.
Next fiscal year.
Okay, so we might be under.
It's going to be close because you do have some other federal funding sources outside of the ARPA, but they're small. And so the 750 is that threshold. Maryland's well aware of it, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. It's not the worst thing in the world to have the compliance audit, but if you can avoid it, you should.
And the second thing, in retrospect, I'm glad we did what we did a few years ago with the, the future liability
Yes.
bonding.
Yeah.
The state and county numbers, are these averages? Because if I recall, back 6 years ago, we were seeing some distressed communities that were at 0% or 10%, right?
These are averages.
Those are averages?
Yes.
So there's still distressed communities
Yes.
that
Correct.
are in big trouble still, okay?
Yes, there is. I'd say more so on the healthcare versus the pensions. But everybody this year seems to experience a pretty good investment performance. So I'm hoping that trend won't continue to the level that it did. But still here, I think the key is, and really what you had to evaluate when you did the bonding was, am I going to earn more on the assets than I'm going to pay on the debt service? And to date, that's been the case.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Granlund Fox?
I'd like to also thank you for the overview, very thorough.
Thank you.
My questions also center around the liability for pension and OPEB.
Yes.
So you talked about your recommendations. What recommendations could you give us as far as extra payments towards that pension liability?
So currently, you are 99% funded on your pension money. And so I don't think any extra payments need to be made at this point in time. The actuary will determine if one is required or not, but you are close to 100% funded. So right now, I think that you're in good shape, and I don't anticipate that you need to do anything different on that. The one thing I do want to make sure that you look at, though, and it's in the letter, but it's said in a way that maybe it's not completely clear, I'll say. You want to make sure that the assumptions that you're using for both your OPEB and your pension plans are consistent with what management thinks is going to happen along working with the actuaries, and in particular on the investment return. That's a big one in terms of what you're assuming. Right now, any monies that are invested through the state pension plans, they're assuming that it's going to be a 7.6 return on assets. You're using 7% of OPEB right now. So you have to look at what your asset mix is and what the historical return is on those to see if that 7% is still reasonable. So the one thing I would suggest is I don't think you need to do any more funding at the moment other than what the actuary says was required, which I think will be in the minimal amounts now because of your funding percentage. But looking at those actuarial assumptions at least once a year to make sure they still make sense for the city based on the city's experience.
And my other question, along with the bond payment, is there a required payment or contribution towards the pension liabilities? So we have our bond payment that we need to make, and then
Yes.
is there an additional payment?
Yeah, this year that was around $200,000 of additional that was required in addition to the bond.
So we have both payments.
But as you start to get to that overfunding level, like your OPEB plan is right now, so OPEB had no required contributions for the last 2 years because of your funding level. So if you get to, you probably won't get to the degree OPEB is overfunded, but if you get in an overfunded position, that's really limited if anything else has to be put in besides the debt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Gacho?
Thank you. On attachment number 2 in our book, and I'm not sure if this is a question so much for you, but on page 6 it talks about the city's changes in net positions, and then for revenue for investment earnings, both under governmental activities and revenue for business type activities. Combined, those fell about, well, over $500,000 last year, or in 2021. Do we know what accounts for that? Because that is a huge reduction. It was like 88% drop in the one in governmental activities.
Are you looking at the larger financial statement?
So it is management's discussion and analysis
Got it.
continued,
Yep.
page labeled number 6.
Okay. And could you ask your question again, please? No, I'm the right.
So for both categories, governmental activities and business type activities, the
Yes.
investment earnings combined was reduced by over 500,000. So I'm just wondering what would account for
Okay.
that level.
Got it. I don't know if you want to handle it, but what I can say is this, is that the investments that the city is allowed to invest in outside of its pension and OPEB plans is very limited. It's very high conservative, low return investments. And so this year, the return on a number of those was less than 1% for the general city invested assets. The city has invested in the Oakland County investment pools. Those get you a little bit higher return. Typically right now, I think it's a little bit over 1%. But the vehicles that you're allowed to invest in are limited, and the returns on those were very low this past year. And we've seen that consistent across all our communities. Marilyn, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think on the intergovernmental would be the LCSA revenue, the community stabilization revenue. Would that fall under intergovernmental?
I'm
I think it
just
does.
So it's
talking,
about investment.
just below that is investment
Oh,
earnings.
yeah, investment earnings would just be the drop in what we saw in our investment percentages for the year. Those took a big hit with COVID and pandemic for the last year. And like Doug said, we're limited to where we can invest our money. So we did see a big drop in that. And then I'll address the intergovernmental too. That was the local community stabilization for the personal property. We had a few large personal property industrials that did not file their statements with the state. So those actually reverted back to our tax roll last fiscal year. So that reduced the state-funded portion. And now that those have filed, those will return to the LCSA revenue.
With respect to, I mean, you doing audits on other communities, is an 88% reduction, is that around what you're seeing for other communities for the?
We've seen significant reductions. And if you look through the city's investments, the CDs and the treasury securities, some of the things that they are allowed to invest in, those returns are 1%, less than 1%. And we would have been closer to 2 to 3, in a previous year. And so that's a pretty substantial reduction.
If I can just butt in a little bit and talk about that a little bit, I just think the lower level return funds were hard hit during this period of time. I mean, it's practically non-existent, like what you get on your bank accounts and everything else for the past period of time has just gone down and down and down to the point where it's just almost nil. And we're in that area with these investments. Like it or not, I think it's going to turn around and go up soon. So,
But I think the year we're in, we're going to see something similar to this year we just finished in terms of investment returns.
yeah, there might be one
Still
more
quite
year
low now.
delay, but with some inflationary pressures, I think that those things will start to go up. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it.
because we get the periodical reports of how our investments are doing and whatnot, and the ratings, and like Comerica is usually an A, and then everybody else is a B+, B, and B-, and so it's just surprising to see that they're rated that highly, and that was, the return was a massive reduction, so.
I think everything's going on in COVID, they just continued to reduce interest rates and things like that that had some impact in these areas, I think really is really what was the big impact.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right.
Okay.
Great presentation.
All
Thanks,
right,
Doug.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Carolyn, thanks for doing that as well.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the approval of minutes. We've got one set of minutes to approve tonight, and that's from the regular city council meeting of December 7th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support?
Any questions, comments, additions? All right, I got a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting of December 7th, 2021. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up is the first call to the public. The rules for the call to the public are as follows. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included on the agenda immediately after correspondence, and again immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of the council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reason for addressing the council, and all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. Do we have anybody for the first call to the public tonight? Seeing none, I'll close the first call to the public and move on to city manager's reports. We have 2 reports tonight. The first one is the departmental reports in November 2021. Any questions? Councilmember Grenlund Fox.
I have a question about the DPW report, just a quick question. Clarification. Hi.
Hi.
So it says here that the adopted box included with a total of 117 boxes for the season. Is that just for the fall, or that's for the whole?
That was for the whole season, my understanding.
So from January to the present?
Yeah, from April to through November.
Okay. It seemed low.
It did
You have to
to
wait
me
to go
too.
to see
'Cause
those
we,
boxes.
yeah, last year I think we had 120.
Oh, okay, so we're down a
We are,
little
yeah,
bit.
we're up a little.
That was all, just a clarification of what that covered. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Yes, I have probably a question either for you, Tim, or it's for John. I see him out there.
Yep.
The Plant 5 Tri-Bar, the PFOA and PFOS
Yes.
meetings, it said midstream of the process. Is that before the carbon pretreatment, or how?
Yeah, so in Plant 5, they added a carbon treatment system, and when they sampled that first time, they sampled in the wrong location. They're supposed to sample at the end of the process, correct? And they sampled in the middle, which apparently had some breakthrough. So it didn't necessarily get to the plant, but it did pass through a portion that I guess they didn't expect. So
next month's report, it'll be sampled at the proper place?
it is. Yeah, well, they had to resample, yeah, for that sample.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Second set of reports tonight is the quarterly investment and budget report from June 2021. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we have one item of new business tonight, and that's a recommendation to review the fiscal year 2020-2021 financial audit and authorization to accept and file. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Any comments, questions? All right, seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to review the fiscal year 2020-2021 financial audit and authorization to accept and file. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That concludes the new business portion of the meeting tonight. We'll move on to oaths of office. We have 3 council members and the mayor to be sworn in tonight, and Doing the presentation and swearing in is Judge Bondi from the District Court. All right. And,
We want to start here. You want to
Sure.
do this? My name is Robert Bondi. I'm the Chief Judge Pro Tem over the 52nd District Court. Our first division is over here in Novi, Grand River. And so I'm one of your local judges, one of three, so I'm happy to be here to swear in your new elected members to their new terms. And we've got an oath of office here that we're going to do. I think we'll do the mayor first because the mayor's at the top of the council, right? And then we'll go on to the council member that I think is the group. So Mr. Mayor, come down here. Really, I didn't want to hear it 4 times, but so on the camera there. All right. I, Patrick Beagle. Do solemnly swear. That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the State of Michigan.
The Constitution of the State of Michigan.
And the Charter and ordinances of the City of Wixom.
And the Charter and ordinances of the City of Wixom.
Oakland County, Michigan.
Oakland County, Michigan.
And I will faithfully discharge the duties
And I will faithfully discharge the duties
and responsibilities of mayor
and responsibilities of mayor
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my abilities.
So then, according to the Wixom City Charter, Section 3.6, all elected officers' terms of office shall commence at 12 noon on January 1st following the election. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll get that in a minute here. We must have our 3 council members down here. Councilmember Fox, Councilmember Resnick, and Councilmember Sharp. Bob, we'll put the 3 of you across the front here, right in front of the camera here. Citrus can see you. All right. So, raise your right hand. I, and then you state your name.
I, Tim Sharp,
All right, you solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Constitution of the State of Michigan,
the Constitution of the State of
and
Michigan,
the Charter ordinances of the City of Wixom,
the Charter ordinances of the City of Wixom,
Oakland County, Michigan,
Oakland County, Michigan.
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
And I will faithfully discharge the duties
and responsibilities
and
of
responsibilities
City Council member
of City Council member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
According to the Wixom City Charter, Section 6.6, all elective officers' terms of office shall commence at 12 noon on January 1st following the election. Congratulations. You want to get some pictures? You want to get a picture here real quick before I finish? Allowed to listen to some more audit reports.
Can I have my
but-
My wife, my children, this is rare. This might be my last time.
Yeah, let's get them.
Uh-oh, announcement.
Fans will still have me.
You don't want me in the back there, photo?
Have your picture. She's got an extra one.
Now.
Still in the background.
All right.
That's cute.
We get Judge Biden?
That's a good one.
Yeah, I'm gonna come right over, I'm gonna leave out so everybody can sign. And mayor to the left, council members. Ward, yeah, down here with the tenants. All right, how do you want to do this? Want to do a group?
Get in here.
Slide in here, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Is anybody taking a photo?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you close enough for that?
Zoom in.
All right.
That's your fourth audit? You haven't had it.
You want to hear?
It's me.
Is that what you? Only your wife didn't come to the audit every year.
Thank you. Aw, thank you. I just thought I was going to be a bystander. No way. First listen. Apparently.
Without me in it in my gown?
How about you? Are you ready?
I got a bunch more today.
Signature on them. We got one more. Sorry. Just me and you? Okay.
Just throw it out to her when she gets home. Does she like to do that? No, I make her do it because it's the family one. That's the one.
Oh, you're welcome. Signature here and the job will be done for a little while. Just read what your time is. Get it started. I'm ready to go. Oh, you're welcome. You're
Thank you.
Not official.
Took me 2 years. Scissors, and I love
up to the mayor. Got them all. Congratulations.
Thank you, Judge.
That's what I'm doing right now. So I like it. Thank you.
You see the light?
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, and then if you guys want to hang around after the meeting, we're going to have some cupcakes and stuff in the back. So.
Take 2 weeks.
All right. It moves us to the second call to the public. I'm not going to read the call to the public rules again, with the exception this time you can speak whatever's on your mind. Do we have anybody for the second call to the public? Seeing none, I'll close the second call to the public and move on to city manager's comments. City Manager Brown.
City manager updates. We mentioned at a prior council meeting what was happening with the change at the top of the assessment and equalization department, and we do have communication from Oakland County that they do have somebody that is being designated the interim assessor of record. There could be some other paperwork that has to be handled in the future, but we're set on that front for now with that completed. And then we have work anniversaries ranging from Lieutenant Mark Bradley at 20 years to 2 years for multiple people in a variety of capacities at the city. So congratulations to everybody for their years of service to the city, and thank you for that. And that was the only items that I was covering in my city manager update. The rest of it is involved with various events that are happening, and I'll let the rest go unsaid. If there's any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Any questions? Assistant City Manager Benson, you want to add something tonight?
Actually, I do have one thing. I just wanted to give a shout out to City Manager Brown for hosting on his own accord a luncheon for city employees and other members of the community who are involved with the city. It was just a very nice gesture, and it is very much appreciated by staff.
Thank you. Gives me a chance to wear my suit.
That's all there is right now.
Very good. All right, council comments. Councilmember Gacho.
Thank you. Just want to wish everyone a safe and happy and good, relaxing rest of their year, and a good start to the new year, since we won't see each other before then. And just now that it's getting dark, earlier out, public service announcement. It's not an excuse to drive with your brights on all the time. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank the citizens of Wixom for electing me to council for another 4 years. This is my first actual election because I was appointed 2 years ago. So I look forward to having the mandate of the actual population, even though I was unopposed, granted. I know. You can leave that out.
Yeah, I'm not.
Also want to thank my fellow council members and Mayor Beagle for their support in the last 2 years. And I think we have a really fine council. And We have our differences, but we come to consensus most of the time, and I think it's all for the better of the city. And I also like to thank my wife, Anne Marie, for her support and being here tonight. So, thank you.
Welcome. Councilmember Berman.
Congratulations to all the employees and their work anniversaries. Thank you for the lunch today from City Manager Brown. I did appreciate that. And congratulations to everyone who was elected to all of the positions. And despite your distaste for Christmas, I do still like working with you, Councilmember Sharp. And
Councilmember Smiley.
Thank you, Mayor Beagle. Just a simple thank you to the staff for a great year. Steve, Drew, Marilyn, Chiefs Moore, and Roberts. We just sort of help you guys. You guys run the show, and you do a great job. It's been another great year for Wixom, and I thank you. Other than that, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and everybody be safe. Thank you.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox.
I'd like to thank Marilyn and her staff for all of their hard work on the audit. I know it's a lot of work, so thank you for that. And it was a clean audit, so that's a bonus. Congratulations and thank you to all the staff that are celebrating work anniversaries. And then lastly, I'd just like to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mayor. Ron, I want to give kudos to the police force for going into our schools and doing this in a timely fashion. It's unfortunate, but my wife participated today as part of Waldeck Schools, and it was an exciting dinner tonight talking about her experiences. So it's the first time they had the students involved with it, and we thank you for that. And that's it's necessary, and we saw how you saved a lot of lives in Oxford. So thank you. Also, a shout out to the DDA. I mean, doesn't downtown look great? The dazzle, the trees, the lights. Great job. Really looks nice out there. Thanks, Steve, for what a wonderful luncheon today. That was nice. And, we had a lot of good conversation around the tables, and we really appreciate that. And I just want to wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and a Happy New Year.
Thank you. And thanks, Steve, for the nice time and a great lunch today. It was much enjoyed, and I think everybody had a great time. Marilyn, thank you for all your hard work, not only on this audit, but all year long, keeping us on the straight and narrow. And it's always nice to get that report at the end of the year and find out that everything's okay and we don't have to worry about anything. Congratulations to everybody who's celebrating a work anniversary right now, including our own Cheryl Lucas, who's here tonight for 4 years. Thank you. And wish everybody a happy and safe holiday. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
support.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good evening, everybody. Drive safe. Have a good holiday season.